All right, let's get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our September webinar, part of our ongoing series of webinars about grant seeking during crisis, which started as a grant seeking during the COVID crisis, but 2020 continues to throw new things at us. So we've been delving into bite-sized topics that we hope are relevant and helpful as you face choices and challenges as we go through this year. Today, we're discussing how to research new funders, either to supplement your existing grant seeking work or to start grant seeking for the first time. I think some of you might be starting out. So my name is Matt Carter. I am Director of Learning at Grants Plus, and I am excited to join you today. Those of you who've done some of these have heard my voice quite a bit. So I am very happy to be joined by my colleague, Carrie Merkin, who is our Senior Advisor for Research. She is an expert on finding funding for even the most challenging nonprofit work, and I will say probably has forgotten more about research than most of us have ever known. So she will be joining in a moment. A little bit on logistics. First of all, just a reminder that everybody except speakers is automatically muted, so don't worry about your barking dogs, laughing babies, or loud elevators for some of your offices in the background. And throughout the presentation, please feel free to submit written questions via the Q&A feature on your little control panel for Zoom. We will have a Q&A session at the end, but we always like to get questions early, so feel free to send those throughout. And as a reminder, following today, we will share a recording of the webinar and some other links to resources. So let's get started. A little bit about Grants Plus. I know we're lucky today to have many friends and clients joining us. Looking at the attendee list, I'm seeing a lot of familiar names, but I do see some people who are not necessarily familiar with us. So just as a reminder, Grants Plus is a professional grant-seeking firm that has been around since 2007. We actually just had our 13th birthday in August. We have partnered with hundreds of nonprofit organizations and foundations around the country to help them build stronger relationships and get higher grant revenues. Our mission is really helping organizations be confident and successful in the grant seeking process, no matter where they are in their journey. So whether they're getting their first grant or their 2000th grant. And what's significant about our experience, for those of you that pay attention to the date there, is that we really grew into an organization helping our clients recover and thrive in the wake of the 2008-2009 financial crisis. So while crisis is swirling around us, this is nothing new to Grants Plus. So we're happy to help as many people as we can get through this. So today we're going to talk about a few things. First, we're going to talk about actively seeking new funders. We're going to talk about developing your funder flow of funders that you kind of keep an eye on. And then what to do next. And if you are familiar with Grants Plus or have been on any of our webinars, you will not be surprised that Communicate is part of that. So first off, why does finding new grants matter? Well, if you're looking at this chart, and granted the data is a couple months old now, but it demonstrates a key point. Grants are stable in a time of crisis. Even as individuals are forced to pull back sometimes because their situation has changed, grant makers continue making grants. And for some organizations, increased grant funding may help offset losses from other sources. So that is great. And we have seen grant makers step up time and time again during times of crisis, and can't say enough about how wonderful that is. The downside is that lots of fundraisers know this. So we're going to be looking at a more competitive field for grant seekers in the near future. So we've all got to up our game and expand our pool of funders. And this will be a reminder to some of you, but how do you find your match? Because not every funder is going to be a fit for what you do. No matter how great your organization is, not everyone's going to be a fit. And I actually teach this in our 30-day Grant Coach grant seeking course. As I say, this is not exactly a flowchart, but it's very close to one. So going through this, you want to look for opportunities from funders that have a mission or vision that your work will advance. So if your work doesn't advance a funder's mission, they are not likely to fund you. You want to find funders that fund in your geographic area or are a national funder that funds in multiple geographies. You want to find funders that support the populations that you support. And you want to find funders that fund organizations like yours. So of your size, of your type, in your service area. So basically, a funder that is not only funding large national organizations, if you are a small local organization, or is not only making grants to small local organizations if you're a large regional organization. So that is what you are looking for when you are looking at new funders. And in all of this, past giving is the key. The grants that a funder has made recently are really the best way to know what it really cares about. No matter how much language a funder may have about its mission and focus, and a 3-click web page about its funding priorities and all of that, past grants are really where the rubber meets the road. So, a funder might go on about its environmental commitment, but if it only makes 2 grants to the same 2 environmental organizations every year and makes 20 grants to the arts, they may not be a great fit for your environmental organization. And really, for smaller funders, past grants may be all you have to go on. When you're looking at these funders, they may not have a website, they may not have an annual report, they may not have a robust presence. So all you have got is the past grants in their Form 990. So for a lot of smaller funders, that is all you can get. So always double check giving, no matter how much their mission statement seems like a fit, no matter how much what they say about what they care about seems like a fit, always check their funding. And you can see there's an asterisk on the slide. And that is because unless the funder has recently changed its focus, the opposite might be true. We have seen scenarios where a funder will have spent 10 years giving to children, and then they have their strategic planning session, and suddenly all of those grants mean nothing because now they are mostly concerned about the environment because they realize that that is where the future for children lies, is a clean environment. So there are situations where past giving is not key. But for the most part, for any funder that is continuing what it's doing, you want to continue looking at their past giving. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carrie to talk about some of the practical steps for how to do what we're talking about.
Thanks, Matt. So the first step is to look at those funder databases. I know not everyone has access to a database, but if you do, a few of the examples of what we at Grants Plus use are FDO, Foundation Directory Online, GrantStation, which is something you can use if you're a GPA member or if you have a subscription to Chronicle of Philanthropy, Instrumental, which is another standalone database like FDO, and then Grant Finder, which is Inside Philanthropy's service. Databases are helpful. They're an easy place to start, but it's important to remember that databases aren't perfect. Not only for the reason that Matt just said, that they may not reflect what a foundation's current or future focus is, but they also rely on data that might be a little outdated. They're set up by keywords, and if you use the wrong keyword, you may be missing opportunities. And right now especially, a database may not include crisis funding opportunities, so those opportunities that are pertinent right now to organizations that are dealing with fallout of COVID-19 or addressing racial and social justice. They're a good overview though. Databases can point you in the right direction and let you know who the usual suspects are in a certain giving area. They'll help you make sure that you're not missing anyone obvious. So traditionally, these databases are set up by keyword search. You can also search by geography, which is very important. You can look at the population that you're serving. So if you serve women, if you serve children, veterans, there's different ways that you can parse out your search. We like to recommend that, however, you go beyond the traditional search and really think broadly about what it is that you do and who you impact. So what subjects are perhaps adjacent to your search? You can be really specific with your search and say that you're fighting homelessness. Some funders, however, may be more broad in their description of that and say that they fund human services. So by searching just for homelessness, you're missing some of those funders that might be a perfectly good match, but just don't describe what they do the exact same way. Another example might be if you're looking to support physical fitness for youth, a funder might call that recreation. So there are those idiosyncrasies that you need to think about when you're coming up with keywords, and try to come up with quite a few to make sure that you're hitting on different points. As far as population, you want to look at the funders who care about those you serve. Actually, we just did some work for a veterans organization, and I found in searching there that a lot of funders want to serve veterans and they're less particular about how they do that. So some of them are interested in mental health and services for caregivers and physical rehabilitation. So they might hit on all three or more of those topics, but the common thread is that they're serving veterans. So the people you serve is almost as important as the subject area, in a lot of cases more important. You also want to look at who is affiliated with a foundation. The communication, like Matt said, is key, and one way to easily get the ball rolling with communication is to look for folks that you already know or that maybe your board members know. So in looking at databases, they are usually able to show you who the board members are at each foundation, and if there are staff members at the foundation, you can find that as well. This seems like an obvious step, but it's easy to get caught up in looking at the keywords and the population served and to miss those real people connections that you can make. So we definitely recommend looking at who's affiliated and trying to identify those connections. And again, I just want to reiterate, the databases, try to do a thorough search, get really specific, like I said, with homelessness, get broad with human services, look at Cleveland versus Cuyahoga County versus Ohio. There are all different ways to approach the funding search. The second step that we like to take in our research is to check the competition. It's a step that a lot of us skip, again, when we're focused too much on the keywords and getting those exactly right. You want to look for funders that care about other organizations that are doing work that's similar to yours or that are serving a similar population. These are really high priority funders to check because they've shown an interest in this area. They've made an investment to organizations that are doing similar work. Of course, in your proposals, you want to show how you're still filling a gap and demonstrating why your organization is also worthy of funding. But use these past giving clues and to understand where the funder's priorities actually are. A lot of databases will let you search who is making grants to a particular organization. In FDO, for example, you can actually search the name of an organization and see who gives to them, which is really helpful. Sometimes an organization may have a building or a facility named after a significant donor. That's a pretty easy way to see who is supporting them. We also recommend looking at annual reports from your competition or your collaborators, looking at their newsletters, not only to keep up on what's happening in your ecosystem, but also who may be funding them, who's volunteering for them, connections like that. And also sometimes a nonprofit will just list all of their donors on a donor page or an About Us page or Support Us or something like that. So go ahead and do some homework and look at who else is operating in your sector and who's supporting them. That's a really good place to find those usual suspects. Another place that I like to look are affinity groups. These are groups of grant makers that come together to advance a specific cause or to solve a specific problem. They serve grant makers, so they're not really set up to accommodate nonprofits that are in direct service. But when you're looking at the membership of these affinity groups, it's an easy way to find funders that are interested in your organization's work. A lot of these affinity groups do operate at a national level, so they usually include some of the larger funders versus local family foundations. The membership costs money for grant makers. That's how they operate. So what I like to think is that a funder who joins an affinity group obviously has a very strong alignment with that area of giving. It's something they care about. And by seeing that, it's a signal to you as a nonprofit that they might be interested in the work that you're doing in that area. So there are affinity groups like Grant Makers in Health, Disability Funders Network that are serving a specific population or convening around a specific subject area. There are also affinity groups that meet on a regional basis. So there's the Florida Philanthropic Network, for example, or Philanthropy Ohio. These state associations of grant makers are an excellent place to find foundations that are, again, making an investment and coming together and developing shared practices and advancing good work in their field. Another example is the Association of Black Foundation Executives. So looking at different program areas of the foundation and seeing how those folks are meeting up and discussing different topics. This can be an interesting way to find new funders and also to see who's setting trends in the field. I also think it could be helpful and identifying connections with current funders. So one example I can think of is the Cleveland Foundation, which is the local community foundation and is also a member of Grant Makers in the Arts, which is a large affinity group. So by becoming a member of Grant Makers in the Arts, Cleveland Foundation is signaling that it's very invested in advancing the arts, which as a current recipient, you might already know. But you could also look at the Grant Makers in the Arts website to see who else is a member there. Who might your Cleveland Foundation program officer know at other foundations because of their membership in this affinity group, and what kind of connections can they possibly help you make? And can they serve as an advocate for you in the face of other funders? So Matt mentioned earlier that it's not just about finding opportunities now and then. An easy and efficient way to set up your grant seeking efforts and grant research efforts is to develop a flow of opportunities. You might not have hours and hours to spend on a regular basis doing these searches and looking at affinity groups and your competitors. So finding up a way to have that information flowing to you on a regular basis is really ideal. So you, of course, want to do a point-in-time search every once in a while, especially if an emerging need comes up. But sometimes the databases aren't updated as quickly as, say, a funder's website or social media feed. So linking into those resources and those funders on a regular basis so that the information is coming to you is really ideal and can keep you informed of opportunities coming up. Of course, the foundation is going to update its website before it updates the database. You can sign up for funding opportunity alerts. There are free options that are listed here. Philanthropy News Digest is a service of Candid, and it sends RFPs. It also has news and job openings in the field. Chronicle of Philanthropy and grants.gov, they both have a number of newsletters you can sign up for, and they also send specific opportunities along with grant seeking tips and trends. GrantStation also has a newsletter, and that one includes local, national, and government opportunities in your inbox, and sometimes those reveal prospects that you might not have thought about before, or that are just doing a one-time initiative that might not just necessarily surface in a database search. Also, it sounds obvious, but not everyone does this. Just set yourself up to receive information. If you have a regular funder, sign up for their newsletter. A lot of funders report who they're giving to, and that's another way to stay on top of your competitor organizations. They put information on social media, and then again, they update their websites regularly. So staying on top of those foundations that interest you most, or foundations that you may identify in a database and want to stay on top of, that's really your best bet in terms of developing this regular flow of information. You also want to listen to what funders say. I just mentioned that a funder is going to update their own website before they update the database team, so you want to make sure that you check there first. Many funders also serve as thought leaders and trendsetters in their field, especially those foundations that are larger and have a professional programs staff that can devote their time to getting out in the community and talking about what they do. So pay attention to that. What are they saying to the public? What are they doing? If they're presenting at a panel or at a conference, you know, what conference is it and what does that say about what they care about? And if you can attend or listen in, obviously that would be helpful too. They'll likely talk about their program priorities and even some tips for applying, which may not appear on their website or in the database. And just like, you know, joining affinity groups, the fact that they're at a conference or at a panel or engaging with the public usually means that they want to be more active in this field. They may want more grant seekers to approach them for a particular topic because they want to make some change in that area and they're ready to make an investment in that area. Databases are built around historical data. Like we said, the data typically comes from a 990 report that a foundation files, but funders are usually putting information out more frequently than that. And that points to the future of their grant making, or in times of crisis like this, sudden shifts in their grant making. So the database can only go so far. That's why you need to connect to these funders through their own publications and to stay on top of their priorities. In addition to those panels and conferences and signing up for the email list and social media, sometimes a foundation, usually a larger foundation, will put out a paper about work that they've done or work that they plan to do and best practices and findings around that, or maybe even a press release about a significant gift that they have made. So those are some of the ways that you can stay on top of what funders are doing and listen to what they're saying and let that drive your research. So Matt, I will pass it over to you to talk a little bit about what to do once you've identified those prospects.
Thank you, Carrie. And I just wanted to add to one of your things, talking about databases being built around historical data that's got some lag to it. COVID has really shown us I don't want to say the weakness, but it has shown us kind of one of the artifacts of that, in that tons of people, including Grants Plus, were pulling together lists of COVID emergency funders because the databases were not set up necessarily to have that instantaneous connection. Now, several of the people that run the databases did do those lists as well. But it sort of shows the importance of staying up on what funders are saying, and as I segue my slide, communicating with them. So a little bit of advice on what to do with the matches that you found from the perspective of a grant seeker. So I said earlier, if you've worked with Grants Plus, this should be no surprise that we are saying that you need to communicate. This was true before our year of crisis, and it's even more true now. And there's a few reasons for that. I mean, you will eventually need to talk to a funder anyway. No matter what happens, no matter how great you think they are, you're going to have to give them a call or should be giving them a call to talk about what you are trying to do and what you would like funding for. And this can be really useful for, especially for funders that have kind of a broad mission or have a really widespread giving history. A funder that just seems to give all over and doesn't have a lot of information about their priorities. You can drive yourself crazy trying to track down exactly what their priorities are based on past giving, based on little clues you find. Or you can pick up the phone or send a quick email to a funder and ask, talk about your organization a little bit and ask them if you are something they would be interested in. Even for a funder where you have got a lot of information about them, you still want to call and help ensure that, you might think that, you have all sorts of evidence that funder is the one. And then you reach out to confirm that because they may not think so. They may disagree with your assessment of how well you fit, and you want to save time and talk to them and not spend all sorts of time developing a proposal. So you've got kind of a dual thing here. You can confirm that a funder is indeed a good fit when you don't have great evidence, and you can confirm they're a great fit when you have got great evidence, just to make sure. At the very least, this serves as a confirmation and the start of a relationship, and this does not need to be a major thing, but can lead to major dividends. So really, all you need to do is have a concise and direct communication. I would say a year ago, we would have said absolutely call the funder. 3 months ago, I would have said absolutely email the funder. Today, it can go either way. Funders, a lot of foundations are back kind of socially distanced in their offices and have access to their phones again. Some do not. A lot of funders that have websites actually will say, I've seen a lot of banners that say our staff is working remotely but keeping our regular hours, please call, something like that. So either way, email or call. But what you want to do is show that you have done your homework and that you think this funder is a fit for your work and that your work will advance this funder's mission, but you just want to make sure. So you want to explain why you think your work is a fit. And that, a lot of times we will say, just reflect the funder's language back. So you can see an example there. Just like your foundation, we think blank. You also want to show that, again, showing your homework, referencing some past support if you can find that. So you're showing the funder, you're kind of showing them respect that, we have done our homework and it looks like we are a good fit for what you do. And then just ask the funder if they're interested in reviewing a proposal. You're not looking for a yes or no, you're just trying to confirm your research. You want to show that you are not, calling the entire phone book trying to see who's going to fund you, but that you do want to confirm. And, that may start the relationship that starts with well, we're really focused on something else right now, but come back to us next year. Or you might find out that even though this funder has a whole past history of giving to organizations like yours, there's something about your organization they don't want to fund, and that is a bummer as a grant seeker, but it's a reality, and it's okay because it saves you from having to write an application to find that out. So really, it's not complicated. It is just a matter of reaching out and talking to people, which we all as fundraisers are very good at. So I'm going to turn it over to Q&A right now. We actually had a couple come in while we were talking here. The first one was a reminder of the names of the funder search sites. So those are Foundation Directory Online by Candid is kind of the biggie. Inside Philanthropy has a grant finder. Instrumental, INSTRUMENTL. Google will probably try to correct you on that. Has a great site for searching. And GrantStation is another one, and that is if you're a Grants Professional Association member, you have access to that. So just clarifying that. One of the other questions that came through, and I'm actually going to ask this to Carrie. Somebody asked that she says she often finds herself going down a rabbit hole and getting lost when researching funders. So do you have any tips for staying on task?
Yeah, I do. I know not everyone has as much time as a Grants Plus research team to look at funders, especially if foundation research is only part of your job. My recommendation is just to spend your time looking at the best bets. So going down that rabbit hole where you're looking at foundations that made 1 or 2 grants in your area 5 or 10 years ago, those are not likely prospects. Foundations that grant in your area but maybe give to the same 3, 4 organizations every year for the past several years probably are not prospects either and not going to be open to a new grantee. Also, it's important to remember, again, especially if this is only part of your role, that foundation funding is only one piece of the pie. So you don't want to get stuck looking at these remote prospects when there may be other opportunities that are worth your time and effort.
And I agree. I actually, when I'm doing this, I will set very specific calendar appointments for myself so I cannot go down a rabbit hole for hours at a time. But yeah, definitely, start with your lowest hanging fruit. And if you already have that, if you're looking for not your 3rd grant, but your 50th grant, you don't need to research all that stuff you've already looked at. You can then, start to look at the funders where there might be a little bit of a stretch. And you don't have to look at all those at once. You can take that in small chunks. Carrie, we had another question that comes in that I have an opinion on, but I'm curious about yours. Is there any reason to subscribe to multiple databases, especially if you already subscribe to Foundation Directory Online?
That is a good question. I think if your job is researching grants, then there is value to looking at other databases. The databases pull information and present information in various ways, and that can be really helpful. If you have a limited budget, I do think that one database supplemented by looking at the websites and the social media and the other things that we mentioned is probably enough. I mean, it's nice, again, to have those extra resources to look at, but I find that more often than not, they just confirm what we're already finding in other databases or just giving us a slightly different way of looking at it.
Yeah, and I would say, Carrie, when I was a development director, I had a subscription to one database and then was on the marketing email lists for all the other ones, so I could occasionally get a free trial. They'd have a campaign, free 2-week trial this summer, and would sign up and do a whole bunch of research then in other ones. So
yeah.
there are definitely ways around that. There are opportunities, and I mean, Foundation Directory also is available at about 400 partner sites, which are usually libraries. So there is access to it. I had one other question come in. How much of grant seeking is related to preparation versus developing longer term relationships with funders? That is, we've got 1 minute left, and that is probably a hour-long philosophical discussion, possibly over a coffee. But I will say both are critical. A great program can be sunk by a terrible application. So you need to make sure that you are putting in the work there. But it also is very helpful to have the relationships, not because you've got a relationship so it's going to turn a no into a yes, but because a relationship will help you get more candid feedback from a funder. It will help you shape what you're doing. A funder will be more likely to talk about very specific things about your program once you've got a relationship. So they are both crucial. It's not an either or. So with that, we are unfortunately right at 12:30. Thank you for the great questions. Just as a reminder, Grants Plus has a couple resources up right now to help us get through our year. We've got a resource on racial justice grants that we are updating regularly. And then a directory of COVID-19 grants that a lot of them are still open. I am actually responsible for reviewing that, and there are a lot that are still accepting applications. So that is still ongoing. Don't forget to check those out. Also, we will send a recording of this webinar later on this afternoon. And if you would like a consultation with one of our Senior Grants Plus experts, if you've got kind of a question about something in our kind of year of crisis, feel free to email us. This is not a sales pitch. This is not, you're not going to go on our list forever and we're going to bug you. This is really, we want to help nonprofits, and sometimes a quick question from a grants expert can be very helpful. So don't be afraid to do that. Also, our next webinar topic coming up on September 30th is Check Your Labels, Race, Gender, and Power in Grant Writing. And we're going to talk about using people-centered language and the importance of our language and being putting a lot of intent behind how we talk about the populations we serve. So I am really looking forward to that. I hope most of you are going to join then. In the meantime, until then, have a great rest of your week, and we will talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.